Happy Halloween, folks. We are here tonight to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Tricks and Treats at the Wax Musee. This is the Halloween event from October 31st, 1981 that kicked off programming for Coney Island USA, the 40-year-old nonprofit responsible for the Mermaid Parade, the Coney Island Circus Sideshow, Burlesque at the Beach, the Film Festival, Puppets Come Home, and so much more. I'm Brendan Schweda. I'm here representing Puppets Come Home, a relatively new program to Coney Island USA. And I'm thrilled to be joined by two gentlemen who were integral to 1981's Tricks and Treats at the Wax Musee. Coney Island USA founder, artistic director Dick Zigun, and pioneer of object theater and prolific puppeteer Paul Zaloom. So welcome to you both, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Brendan. 40 years later. Wow.
Yeah, that's kind of wild.
Let me
go ahead.
No, go.
Nope.
All right, fine. I'll go. So I'll start just by asking how you two met. Well, I know Paul had some experience with Bread and Puppet and Coney, and Dick arrived in the late 70s, but how did you two intersect?
I've been trying to remember that. When I first moved to New York, I ran the box office at Theater for the New City. Could that have been it? Because Bread and Puppet would play Theater for the New City. But Paul, I also, not remembering how it happened, but you were in a reading of one of my plays. I don't know if it was Playwrights Horizons or New Dramatist. How did it all happen, Paul?
I think we probably met at Theater for the New City. Mm-hmm. That would be my guess. And we must have gotten to chatting and yakking. And I believe I also showed up for one of your play readings too. That sounds right to me. But definitely we hung out at Theater for the New City because I was performing there back in the day on 2nd Avenue, right?
Right, yes.
Yeah,
Next
when they
to
had
2nd Avenue Deli. It was a great spot to work.
Yeah.
Lunch.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And George Bartenieff and Crystal Field ran the place. They were husband and wife, and they would have these major screaming matches. Do you remember those where they would like?
Well, for the audience's sake, we should say that they did get divorced later. And yeah. Crystal still is running the theater to this day. George had, I don't think he's with us anymore. I'm not sure about that. He had a good career in film as an actor.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that George had died. I don't know if that's the case, but he worked quite a bit as an actor, and he was quite a guy. And it was interesting working there. How long were you working the ticket booth there?
So only about 6-8 months, something like that, because I left when one of my plays was being produced out in Los Angeles. But when I was there, I was also really interested not just in theater, but the whole performance art scene, and places like Franklin Furnace or the Kitchen or the Year Inn. Were you working at places like that as well?
Oh yeah, all of those places and more. Do you remember A's? That thing called A's? It was like a rent party thing that Arlene Schloss used to do in a big loft on the Bowery with Sonic Youth and all these different folks performing, and that was a lot of fun. And the beers were $1. It was $5 to get in. Mm-hmm. And there was King Tut's Wawa Hut and Geez, so many theaters, different places. I'd perform at the opening of an envelope. I mean, I was always hustling because the more you played in New York, the more publicity you'd get, and word of mouth and stuff like that. And that would seem to be a way to get enough of a reputation so you could get work.
So you, as Brendan said, were one of the pioneers, if not the pioneer, of object manipulation theater. Stuart Sherman was around those days. And my last year doing graduate work at Yale School of Drama, Charles Ludlam was teaching there, and I was Ludlam's pet playwriting student. And he had a conversation with me. I'd never seen Stuart perform, just about him moving around objects on a tray on the Staten Island Ferry, those pieces. And I went home and started writing pieces with what I called tabletop theater. And there was a brief, short tabletop theater piece done toward the end of the 8-hour day at the Wax Museum that you kicked off. So it began and ended in a way with object manipulation.
Huh. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I got to the object thing. I'd worked in bread and puppet theater for a bunch of years, and I wanted to do my own work. And I guess influenced by Oldenburg and Warhol and the whole pop art thing of elevating the object, all sort of via Marcel Duchamp, obviously. And I thought, why not just take all this junk and packaging all this crap that we're ending up in a garbage can and animating it and creating little environments and little hyperactive puppet stories. And, my background was in puppetry. So it just sort of required taking the object, figuring out what it could do, which wasn't much, and having that little bit of nothing be the one thing that he did, and then get rid of it and move on to the next thing. And there were different levels of meaning for the objects and ways they were manipulated and all that. And I just wanted it to be satirical and fast and comic. And, if the joke didn't land, boom, there was another one on the way.
Yep. We have some images of your performance that we can circle back to later on. So that'll be exciting to hear about the piece that you performed for Tricks and Treats.
Yeah.
The other thing going on late 70s, early 80s probably began in the East Village, but spread a bit. It was the alternative space movement, which is a real awkward name for something that's not really a theater, not really an art gallery. So there were places like Franklin Furnace, again, the kitchen, ABC No Rio, Fashion Moda, these low budget places, because in the 80s, New York City was bankrupt and real estate was cheap. And if you had a job and instead of renting an apartment, rented a storefront, you were a producer of the arts. So when I moved to New York, first I rented the second and third floor of a clapboard loft across the street from Astorland, now the entrance to Luna Park. That was 1979, and the building burned down. So I didn't have a theater space. I moved to a small apartment in Soho. I applied to another alternative space that's now famous in Long Island City, PS1, for studio space where I wanted to do brains in jars and, things with wax figures, and they turned that down. So I'm getting influence, like there was the Times Square show, the real estate show. And finally, having come to Coney Island in the late 70s, tried to establish something that didn't happen. The year before the show, 1980, I was living in Manhattan, but Lily from the Wax Museum asked for help. And I organized a group of artists and friends, primarily the group of people who had been coming out to Coney Island while I was renovating the place that burned down. So instead of helping me with my place, a year or two later, we were helping Lily fix up her place. And one thing led to another, and Lily ultimately asked me to curate what turned out to be the last exhibit ever in the World in Wax Museum, John Lennon. And I won't go into a long story that Lily insisted that I contact Yoko Ono and ask for John Lennon's clothes just a few months after he was shot. Tasteless, and yet I figured out a way to do it. Yoko didn't object, but she also didn't give clothes. But anyway, so I curated John Lennon for her, and that led to me as a writer becoming an independent journalist. I wrote a small piece to get Lily some business based on her new John Lennon exhibit that was published in the Soho Weekly News. And I don't remember how it happened, but that led to getting the cover of the art section of the Daily News on, their Weekend Friday section. I had the entire page about Lily at the Wax Museum. So with being on a roll with the engagement with Lily, it's not that Coney Island USA was incorporated or legally founded in any way, but it was a test case to see if we did something Halloween, October 31st, 1981, after the regular season was over, if people would come and beat us up, if the press would come and pay any attention. So it was intended to be a test case of doing performing arts in Coney Island. And going back to a question, Brendan, you asked me, I think before we got going, yes, it was intentional to recreate a dime museum experience, but also connect to the 80s art scene going on at places like the Times Square show.
Right on. So this monumental Tricks and Treats at the Wax Musee took place at Lily St. Angela's World in Wax, and I have some images from the establishment. Before I jump into those, I'm wondering if Paul can talk briefly about, Paul, I guess now you're situated on the West Coast, but you visited us for the Puppets Come Home World Puppetry Day event. I think you talked about visiting Coney as a kid, and you spoke briefly about your time working for Bread and Puppet. Can you just reiterate, I guess, some of that Coney experience that led up to coming back for Dick's event?
Well, I was living in Vermont, working at the Bread and Puppet Theater, and we were sort of whole wheat revolutionary hippies or whatever, and are self-described, self-deluded. And I did spend a couple of weeks one summer at a theater that we had in Coney Island that Nathan Handwerker of Nathan's Famous had lent us or rented for $1 a summer or whatever. And it was right across from Nathan's on the second floor. And we did Revenge of the Law and Harvey McLeod. And Revenge of the Law was about Attica, which had happened a year or two previously, the big prison uprising in upstate New York. And Coney was pretty rough and tumble in those days. Like gunshots at night and just it was kind of hairy and a little intense going back and forth from work, but it was great being there because when in the 50s, my brother's birthday was always at Coney Island. So, I was there in the steeplechase and doing the bumper cars and all that stuff at Coney. And so it's a long-term thing for me. And then when I started doing the solo stuff and Dick had invited me to do this gig, I remember the Wax Museum so well. And I just checked I was looking at the map that you sent me, the floor plan, and I actually remember the layout and where everything was accurately. I guess it made such an impression on me that it's burned in my memory, the geography of the place.
It was such a strong environment and unique environment. It was unforgettable.
Yeah, you'd come in and it was pretty dark in there, and there were various booths, and the booths had different vignettes in wax, and they were covered with chicken wire, most of them, to keep people from chucking like bottles and shit like that, because it was kind of rough and tumble back in those days. And the newest exhibit when we were there was Roberto Clemente, who was the Dominican ball player who had tragically died in a plane crash.
In the Pittsburgh Pirates.
That's right. And he had died in the 70s. So that was the newest exhibit. But so you had these different booths with these vignettes, like the one I remember really well was Richard Speck killing the nurses. And they were hiding under the bed and stuff like that. It was like really gruesome and horrible. And, mainly a lot of this was like basically acts of men of violence, against women, but then also famous figures, because as you entered, if I remember this right, there were heads.
From Puerto Rico, San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Right.
Yeah. So I remember the heads. I remember there was an Eisenhower head, and there was one of Tom Dewey, who was the
full figures, not just heads.
Really?
And they were standing in a case with three figures. Between them was Madame Chiang Kai-shek.
Right.
I don't know why.
Well, let's take a look, because we do have some of these images. So let me pull this up and we can visit. Behind me is an older photo of the world in wax, but let's get a peek up close here. Pull some of this. All right, so here we have the World in Wax Musee. According to the Drama Review article written about your Tricks and Treats event, and I think also this is mentioned in the press release for Tricks and Treats, the World in Wax was the only wax museum in New York at the time, and the oldest in the United States. Opened in 1926 by Lily St. Angelo, who was still running it. So here's the exterior.
And the photo you're talking to us in front of is the first or second year of the Wax Museum. And the man on the left is one of the original wax sculptors.
Right on. Yeah, I think I saw on the notes this, I think this image is from 1928. Here we go. So this is the image, and Dick noted that the gentleman on the left was one of the original sculptors.
And as we go through, two of those original exhibits, Snyder Gray and Hickman the Fox, were still on display.
Cool.
Wow.
And this was located, this is Stillwell Avenue, if I'm not mistaken.
Essentially, where it's a different building, not the original building, but on Stillwell, where Wahlburgers restaurant was, now Crab du Jour, that's the spot.
Right on.
And the back of the building, the alley, this would have been the back entrance.
Right on. And the note, you can probably see it, but I'll read out. The World in Wax has no lease, no insurance. Its owner is 80 years old and ill in health. There are no heirs, no family, no other workers. The neighborhood is plagued by arson. So this is kind of the rough and tumble Coney that Paul was referring to. And there's Roberto Clemente right over the door.
Yep.
Pinkman the
And
fox.
Hickman the fox, yes. And these
dear.
were gruesome and horrifying.
Yeah.
There's a certain artistry, if you can imagine, over the years that Lily would hire a wax sculptor, and they would work from a photo, whether in a newspaper provided by Lily, but the wax sculptor would center a wax head and hands or a torso like in the bathtub. And other than that, Lily would have to buy a mannequin, dress a mannequin, pose a mannequin, and work either herself or with other people to create these trompe l'oeil mixed with real object, booth settings, which are full of disturbing imagery.
For sure. This is secret closet storage. So I know that you had told me at some point, Dick, that when you dug into the collection, you found all kinds of things buried in boxes with creatures nested in them. Is this from that?
Right. So I had keys to the Wax Museum and unlimited access 30 days before the show. So for artists doing art installations, I was able to accommodate them. Charles Ludlam was in a period in his life where he was shooting super rate silent movies and asked if he could come in for a couple of weeks before the show and shoot a film. And we started exploring and found secret storage rooms. And every time since 1926 that Lily had put in a new exhibit, perhaps one or at most two a year, she would have to take down an exhibit, probably reuse the mannequin, but put the head and the hands in a box, write the name of the dismembered head and hands, who they belong to. For instance, Babe Ruth's head and hands on a box, and they sat there for decades, and they made perfect nesting for baby rats who would be born inside the newspaper packing around the heads, be born, and there would be human hair in the heads that the baby rats would eat. So when we found heads in storage, they all had crew cuts. But those heads became part of my performance. Paul, as I said, you remembered these three figures just as heads, but they're fully dressed there.
Yeah, well, I'm conflating. I'm not remembering which particular characters were full body, and because I think there was also a cabinet that had just heads, if I'm not mistaken, and there was also scenes from Dante's Inferno painted above all the exhibits in the whole place, which they were really great.
Above all of the booths,
right?
And in addition to that, it had unpainted wooden floors, which have a period from a different decade. It had this railing keeping you back from the displays. That railing is currently in use protecting the stage at Coney Island, USA, Sideshows by the Seashore.
So there we had Dewey, MacArthur, Chiang Kai-shek. Here we have Dr. Albert Einstein. I'm not sure which doctor this is, but he's got a two-headed baby.
So there are supernumeraries, either famous people who had been lost to history or stockheads, which were used for anonymous doctors. The point of this exhibit was the two-headed baby.
Right on.
I remember that some of the figures the wax was peeling off a little bit, like the top layer. So there'd be these sort of big crusty blobs of wax peeling off.
They had bad emphysema, yes.
Yeah, needless to say, it added to the whole macabre vibe in the place, the sort of deterioration of these different things.
Lily was an eccentric figure. And over decades, she had good quality wax artists and ones that were of lesser quality. At some unknown point, she asked somebody to paint over the beautiful translucent wax, which glows like real skin. And then having painted those, I'm just distracted by how skinny I used to be.
I'll go back one. I'm so curious about the tradition in these wax museums to have such vivid and horrific real life crimes. I know, this wax museum opens in the 20s, so this is before the popular rise of television. But how do we explain the gruesome?
The gruesomeness is because although you were familiar reading about these heinous people in the newspaper and reading about what they did, the newspaper would never show you the bloody moment the murder happened. And you can only get that at a wax museum, which exploited that sensationalism.
Right on. And here's the John Lennon that you mentioned, Dick and Lily Santangelo.
Right. So I got to pick a photo of John Lennon to mail to a wax sculptor in Pittsburgh. I used the photo included in the White Album of John Lennon. We got a box back with John Lennon's head and hands. Lily arranged for a mannequin. I worked with a fashionista in Soho who ran a hair salon, Romeo de Silva, of the shop called Girl Loves Boy. And we went shopping and purposely dressed John Lennon in an all white suit, sneakers, and a peace button.
Right on. Here's Lily looking lovingly at John. And some presidents and like Dr.
John
Martin Luther
Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, and Martin Luther King Jr.
That Bobby Kennedy is pretty striking.
Yeah,
so
President Kennedy's face has clearly been painted and looks disturbing.
Yeah.
But they're ready for business. Let's see here. And here we have, this is the original show poster in a smaller form. Tricks and Treats, Coney Island USA.
The show opened with Paul Zaloom at noon.
Certainly did. I know this is small. I have some more detailed images of the complete run of show that we can take a look at. So let me see.
Brendan noticed that the Coney Island USA logo hadn't even been invented yet. We've got the face, but not the circle.
And here's your floor plan, Paul. So this is just kind of lettering and layout, but here we have a complete list of the tableau that were displayed. So Ruth Snyder, Judd Gray, a screwdriver killer, Muhammad Ali, Richard Speck, a 5-year-old mother, Roberto Clemente, and so on. So many.
Notice that some like booth F are empty. There were 4 empty ones. I described whether they still had decoration, and a lot of the performances happened within the 4 empty booths.
I was going to say, there's the drama review noted at least one of those that sounded super intriguing. A piece, which is it? By an untiled exhibit by Vanillin Green. A booth was filled with leaves of various colors. A broom leaned against the wall, and a tape of birds chirping was playing. An ode to the seasons and the death of a mother was printed on a sheet of clear plastic suspended from the ceiling at the front of the booth. There was no live performer in this presentation. So I don't know
Actually,
which
there were
that
art
was.
installations included by Philomena Morano, who did an environment around John Lennon. Richard Egan did one as well.
So what I'm seeing here at the bottom, suggested area performance. So this was clearly modified for your event, correct? Like these spaces. This is your
No,
planning
these
for the
were
event?
all existing spaces that I just identified.
Right on.
Yeah, if I remember right, Charles Ludlam and Everett Quinton did the Escape from the Straitjacket Act
inside one of the booths, yes.
Yeah, and let's see, I believe it was maybe booth P. That's what my recollection is.
Yes, you are correct. Yes.
Diagonally across from Richard Speck, which I think was E. And I again, I don't remember anything. I'm like a billion years old. My mind is like a sieve. But because the place was so rich in visual information and just struck you in an emotional way, in a psychological way, so deeply that images from it are just implanted in my brain, including the geography of the place and where things were. So it made a big impression on me. I don't know if my performance made an impression on anybody, but the experience sure put an impression on my feeble mind.
Right on.
We added to that, we had similar to a 1920s cigarette girl with a tray. We had hired a model with a cigarette tray, not to sell cigarettes, but to walk around with wax lips, wax mustaches, and wax fingers you could buy.
And we have an image of that I can show in a bit. I'm just going to show briefly. This was, I believe, this is the official press release. And as you mentioned, Dick, you don't have your current Coney Island USA logo, but there's a funny face.
I mean, it's my address in Soho. It's not even a Coney Island address.
Wow. Coney Island USA, a new arts organization for the creative preservation of American popular culture, announces Tricks and Treats at the Wax Musee, a Halloween celebration of the oldest wax museum in the country. Art installations, dance, film, performance art, and theater presented from noon until 8 p.m. Saturday, October 31st. Charles Ludlam from the Ridiculous Theatrical Company, a film by Frank and Caroline Morris, Paul Zaloom, Bill Gordy, Disband, a lecture from Millie St. Angelo, the permanent collection of the museum, 49 wax figures, many over 50 years old, will remain in place while 4 empty display stalls, 2 Barker booths, and other novel settings are used by the participants. Many artists also plan to present experimental work inspired by Halloween themes. This is a benefit show. Right on. Admission, $3. The audience free to come and go as they please. I'll just note real quick, I'm really intrigued by the layout here. The main entrance directly opposite the exit. So, as disturbing as all this was, I feel like someone could have slipped in, and if they didn't like what they saw and didn't want to explore, they could shoot straight out the back.
Lily, at that point in the 80s, would not open that exit because it required an extra employee. So although it could serve as an emergency exit, it was not in use.
Right on. So what else do we have here? Here's the full breakdown. Just so we can note anyone who participated. 12 noon, Paul Zaloom, a one-man plastic found object puppeteer. Paul Zaloom has worked with the Bread and Puppet Theater for 10 years. His solo work includes Fruit of Zaloom, Zalooming Along, and Zaloominations, which will be presented this November at Theater for the New City. Paul, do you want to say anything about, I guess, the experience of opening this very unique event?
Well, I did this piece called New York, New York. It was just about the craziness of living in the city. I wore this hat.
Here, let's take a look at your hat here.
This is my yellow cab hat from I'd gotten from a cabbie in San Francisco when I was teaching in a hippie free school there. And so I wore this thing, and I had a bunch of found objects, various styrofoam boxes playing the skyline, using a screwdriver as a jackhammer. I had a drunk little foam rubber drunk that he's staggering around. At some point, I squeezed him and he kind of peed all over the stage. There was a glass filled with plastic eyeballs, and they were the tourists. So as I would roll the glass around, the eyes would look around, which I loved. I don't know about anybody else, but it was like, oh, that's so hilarious. And I had a tube that I blew on, because I would arrive walk through the audience and then arrive at the stage, which is basically a card table.
So that sort of trumpeted and announced the first act of the show, your trumpet.
Yeah, blowing this tube, like we call them in Bread and Puppet a soft horn, just a piece of plumbing pipe that you blow in and makes a nice low tone. And it's sort of a hyperactive little satire about New York, living in New York. I think there was also a section in there about gentrification. So a building, I used like wine cases, cardboard wine cases, and the building would get renovated. So the wine case would have the dividers inside for the wine bottles. So there'd be like 12. And then the renovation, I'd take that out, and then a new one would come that have 24 separations, just gags like that. And the subway was a plastic tube with dirt in it and a few eyeballs. And I think there were rats in it too. And I would just shift the tube back and forth, and the rats and the eyeballs and the dirt would shift from one end to the other. And so it was a goof, and it was fun to do. Satire. There wasn't a hell of a lot of political satire and comedy in the performance arts scene. There was a little bit more obtuse or obscure stuff going on. So, and my thing was just craven, pandering to the audience, and comedy and all the rest of it, with hopefully some aspect of political satire. I mean, I noticed in one of the photographs I was holding up a picture of probably Newsweek magazine with Reagan's picture on it, and I don't remember that part of it, but it probably had something to do with screw New York, to hell with New York.
Right on. Yeah, and we can see some of these images in a minute. I'll bring us back to where is it here? This is, let's see. So we start with Paul Zaloom, 12:30, Dimitri Mantis, Keystone Cop Rubber Rapper.
Who was our sort of MC or announcer, moving people from one area to the other over the 8-hour day.
Right on. At 1 p.m., Escape from Regulation Straitjacket, as used on The Murderous and Stain, performed by Charles Ludlam and Everett Quinton. Says it was based on Houdini's Straitjacket, and somewhere I read, I think it was a drama review talking about Houdini also getting his start in dime museum. So there's a connection there.
Houdini got essentially has started Coney Island and got married at Coney Island.
Wow.
And this was before the days that I'm partly responsible for of sideshow revival, of there being, over 100 performers at this point across the country who have straitjackets and do straitjacket escape, but it had fallen out of use in terms of traditional sideshow, and nobody had done it for a long while. So it was pretty unique that Charles and Everett did that performance.
Right on. And you can, I guess, maybe I'll include a link there. The film he made at the museum is on YouTube. I think it was part of some festival a few years back. So they have it in 3 parts. So I'll make sure that folks can follow the link to watch this film. It was
part of the Gay Film Festival. They have the date wrong. It was made in 81, not 83. I had pretty much served as the location manager, making it possible and giving them access to the storage room with the heads. But what's remarkable, if you're a Charles Ludlam or ridiculous fan. Charles is in a movie or two. Charles is in an episode of Miami Vice. But he is not on film doing any of his own work, except for this film of Charles Ludlam acting in the Charles Ludlam piece. He had been making an epic silent movie starring Everett Quinton called The Sorrows of Dolores, which has a lot more gravitas, if you will. He had worked on it for years, but Charles, although he directed that, does not appear in it. So if you want to see Charles Ludlam acting Charles Ludlam, it's the only way possible.
Amazing. Cool. And you will see at least a couple photos from his performance in a bit. After Ludlam, the Polar Bear Club presented. It sounds like they did some lectures on the benefits of ice bathing.
No, I had paid for an ice company to deliver a huge block of ice and put that in one of the booths that was empty. And various members of the Polar Bear Club took turns sitting on it and talking to people walking by.
Outstanding. Port Authority, Peter Blank.
Was a fellow playwright from Yale School of Drama, and I don't think he showed up.
Right on. At 1:30 in this very full schedule, Coney, a film by Frank and Caroline Morris. A quick jaunt through New York's famous Coney Island area. Dick, do you think this film still exists somewhere?
Oh yeah, it won an Academy Award one year for Best Animation Short.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at that. Museum of Wax, the Ludlam film, was also at 1:30. At 2 p.m.
When that ran that day, my job was not to watch the film, which I had seen, but distract Lily from watching it when it ran for fear that she would get upset at Charles Ludlam's sensibility.
Did you succeed?
Yes.
Good. At 2 p.m., there was Eclipse, Dance and Music by Daniel Epstein and Roseanne Krauss. It's like a piece devised from complicated numerological divinations and progresses in increments of 2. At 2 p.m. was also the Vanillin Green performance I mentioned.
So Vanillin Green was a feminist performance artist who was a friend of Cynthia Friedman. And Vanillin had been working at one of the alternative spaces we mentioned at the top, Franklin Furnace, which was run by Martha Wilson, a woman performance artist. And Martha Wilson and Ingrid Sishi was editor of Art Forum, the foremost art magazine in the country, and they had a performance art band. Ingrid and Martha and a woman named Elaine Granite, where they would bang on plastic buckets and make up songs and goof on the day's headlines. So what's listed as Vanillin Green there was actually a performance by Disband, and they're in some of the photos you're going to show.
Right on. At 2:30, we had Wax Words, an autobiographical fictional tour through the museum by Bill Gordy.
Bill Gord. Paul, did you know Bill Gord?
Oh, yeah.
626 Broadway was another alternative space that he and his pals were running.
Yep, absolutely.
Also at 2:30, the tap glance penetrates the delay of the blue box. Theater by Creation.
Creation Company was a prominent downtown off-Broadway theater run by Matthew McGuire, who now teaches playwriting. It's some downtown university, not NYU.
Right on. 3 o'clock, Marilyn Monroe sings. You got Marilyn Monroe.
Well,
Allison-
Allison Gordy, who 2 years later was the first Queen Mermaid of the Mermaid Parade.
Right on. Opal confesses at 3 o'clock, a monologue by
Leslie Avazian made a name for herself as actress doing a one-woman show at some point.
3:30, Greater Amusements by Angel Barrero. And then grand finale, which is not the actual finale. This
No.
is a tabletop theater piece by Dick Zigun. It's part of a play called Three Unnatural Acts by Dick D. Zigun, which was been produced at the Mark Taper Forum, Portland Conservatory Theater, and Yale School of Drama, where it won the Molly Kazan Award in 1978. And we have at least a couple of images from that piece as well. 4 o'clock, Sensitive Chaos, a Constamantis film, adapted from Into the Nightlife. Dick, was this connected to your?
So Costa
Into the Nightlife?
was a co-founder of Coney Island USA, and I had not been aware of the Henry Miller bizarre short story. And yes, it was that performance that led to me eventually staging a full production.
Right on. And Paul, here's some Duchamp for you. Marcel Duchamp, The Parrot, or Parrot Duchamp. Does anyone recall this piece?
It was an artist with a parrot.
Very good, very good. At 4:30, The Dashing International.
That's
Lucille.
Romeo from Girl Loves Boy, who addressed John Lennon.
Right on. 4:30, Theater, directed by
Yeah,
Judy
they didn't
Dennis.
show up either.
All right.
How do you not show up for a gig like this? It's like
Seriously. 5 o'clock, Victoria Ladille and Company, movement performance about Women and Words by Else Victoria Nagel and Lori Dill. And The Pulpit Professor, Howard Stein, Dean of Theater Arts at SUNY Purchase.
Yeah, he didn't show up.
All right, moving on. Oh, we're trucking right along here. And then toward the end of the evening, Secrets of the Wax Museum from 6 to 7. Dick D. Zigun presents 50 heads found in the storage rooms of the World in Wax Musee. Artistic director of Coney Island USA, Dick is show curator for Tricks and Treats. He's written articles on World in Wax for Soho News, Daily News, etc. Plays still happening at Coney Island USA. Most recently, Bloody Brains. Education of Al Capone is told by Jimmy Durante. Learn more at dickzigun.com.
Thank you.
7 to 8 p.m. Letter from Ivo Zini.
Now, he did show up, even though he was only supposed to be a letter in the mail. He came from Pittsburgh to be there.
Oh, outstanding. And then I guess Lily, looks like Lily closed out the night with a lecture. And she talked about the history of the museum, Dick?
She didn't talk long. She was emotional and very happy the event had happened.
Right on. Notes some additional attractions, more events to be scheduled. Music by Disband, theater by Len Jenkin, Mr. Monster by Len Shankar, performance by Mary Jane Leach, wax fingernails, wax lips, and wax mustaches, courtesy of Shillett Pearson.
That did happen.
And some art installations, An American Obsession by Ellen Rum, The Destruction of Steeplechase Park by Richard Egan, Elvis by Stephen Gusso, Fact or Fiction, Ryan McDonald, Masks, Public Image, Joe Militello, The Miraculous Sainthood of Charles Francis DiMaggio, The Resurrection of Dillinger, Revolver by Philomena Morano, The Visible Woman by Melanie O'Hara. And this event was co-sponsored by the Brooklyn Union Gas Company and the Interaction Arts Foundation, Inc.
I think Interaction Arts Foundation was Bill Gord and the folks at 626 Broadway, who helped me with a not-for-profit cover for the grant.
Right on. And here I'll run through. I've got photos by Cynthia Friedman. First, we have our lovely polar bears on a
That's
supposed
Al
block of
Matola,
ice.
the president on the left, and Pablo, the athletic director, on the right. And
Very
you
cool.
can't see it, but there is a block of ice there.
Right on.
And that's Allison Gordy. So there was this empty booth that was partially painted like the bottles on the wall, partially three-dimensional like the bar that had been stripped of whatever Lily had in there. So various performers, including Allison, did a performance there.
Very cool. This disband, Dick?
This is this band, yes.
Gang Mark Nixon for death. With a couple of the wax figures looking on. Do you know who this is?
A creation company, Matthew McGuire.
Very cool. Maybe that's a Wurlitzer in the back there. Let's see.
That is Lynn Swanson, a performance artist. That is the Keystone Cop rubber rapper, Dimitri Mantis, who led people around the space all day long. Although I tried to dress the same, if you don't recognize it, that's me in the middle and Richard Egan on the right.
Right on.
And you can see the chicken wire protecting the displays in the background there.
Right on. So that's Richard Egan of the Coney Island Historical Society.
Yes, sir.
Let's see. Out front, somebody in a funny face mask.
Richard Egan again.
Very cool. $3 admission all day.
And there is the model walking around with wax lips you could purchase. Disband again. So my performance, I had found 50 heads in storage, some of them obviously famous people such as Babe Ruth, and there was even a Yankees costume, others nondescript people. So I created various tableaus on this revolving bookcase, and we did a series of vignettes. Oh, that's the actor doing my object manipulation piece, Tabletop Theater.
Cool.
So if you look at the heads, the one top middle is Frank Sinatra, below him, Jimmy Durante, to the right, James Dean, to the left, Clark Gable.
Of course. Right on.
That's great.
Can't mistake that Durante. And even that Sinatra looks pretty good. There's some more. And who's the gentleman in the booth, Dick?
That is Ivo Zini, the wax sculptor from Pittsburgh. Those 7 heads or 8 heads, I might have labeled 8 anonymous dead people.
Right on. Oh, and here we have Everett Quinton and Charles Ludlam.
Look how fabulous that is. Oh my God. That is so great.
And let me see. Does this expand for you if I go like that? Good. Okay, so we can get some close-ups here. A lot of these images existed in contact sheets, and we've got.
So
Charles.
Paul, for producing my first show ever, you were an Obie Award winner. So was Charles, and then the third thing on was a movie that had won an Academy Award. We had some heavy-duty presence here. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it was really, really unforgettable experience, and really an honor to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Got to tell you, it was just wild. I want to make sure before we get done that
Yeah.
you talk about what happened with Lily, what happened with the museum, what happened with everything inside. I don't know if now is the appropriate time, but I would like to make sure you tell us about that.
So that's my mother on the right with Lily, and that's John Lennon behind, and you can see some of the installation Philomena Morano had put around John Lennon.
Okay. Some more Phyllis and Gordy. There's Dick and
Egan,
Richard.
that's my father looking very dapper.
That's great.
The crowd. Now, so according to the drama review, they said hundreds of folks attended. So was this like, people coming in and out through the course of the day?
Right. An 8-hour day, people, at various times would come and go or hang out outside. Some people wanted to see Paul Zaloom, but did not want to see a dance performance. And the other way around.
Lily. John. The exterior.
Notice the folk art quality of Lily's Wax Museum. Elvis Presley's last name is spelled wrong.
Oh, and Roberto Clemente was Puerto Rican. He wasn't Dominican,
Right.
I guess. I always thought he was Dominican.
I believe it is Puerto Rican.
Yeah, very, very tragic, very sad hero of the community dying in that plane crash.
There's Lily on the podium.
Creation again.
Creation.
Ivo Zini, who had sculpted John Lennon. So that's his artwork. Yep.
Out front again. There's the banner. So this, I guess, was...
We found that in storage without any idea from what period or how it had been used.
That's beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah, there are some of the heads. Oh my God, so great.
And here we have Paul Zaloom. Paul, this is a photo that you had supplied to me that Cynthia took. This is
same hat.
Yeah, same hat indeed. And this is your performer agreement. So everyone was issued standard agreements. We have Paul Zaloom already well on the way in his career at this point.
You can tell how long ago this was because where it says phone, there's no area code. There was no 718, none of that bullshit. Everything was 212 back in the day.
Agreement signed on the line. And here, this is I blew these up from a contact sheet, so they're not as high quality, but this is in the order in which these shots were taken. There were 6 strips that included. So this is your piece, Paul.
Yeah, so the skyline, the styrofoam is the skyline. You can see in the middle top row, I'm holding the glass with eyeballs. And I use that tube that you can see in the upper left. I use it not only as a pipe, as a foghorn or whatever, but also as a spyglass. And then I'm also spraying water to imitate the sea spray as the ship came into Manhattan Harbor.
Right on. What else we have here? We have.
Yeah, there's the apartment building thing I was telling you about with the dividers.
Yep.
In the lower row, and on the upper left, those are the those two things leaning on the floor. There are 2 pink plastic chutes that I found on the street somewhere near Canal Street, and they played the World Trade Center, and they were great. They were great for scale. They were identical. They looked like the World Trade Center. And I've been kicking myself. I gave them the heave ho a few years ago because they just took up too much space. But I've had a few moments where I'm like, oh, I need that. I
Wow.
need that prop. I had some job and I needed it for some damn thing. And I think in the upper right, I think I'm doing a sock puppet that was the landlord, and he had a wooden cigar. And maybe his hair was made out of steel wool or something like that. So he was the ball busting landlord.
Paul, I heard at some point you gave there was a lecture I saw online talking about the selection of objects, and some things have certain inherent qualities that you can play off of. Can you talk a little bit about object selection and how that's developed in your career?
Well, sometimes I'll have like casting sessions where I'll get, I have a lot of junk, a lot of stuff, and I'll just pull it out and try to think, okay, what is this? Who is this? What part does this play? What can it do? And then physically what it does. So the eyeball thing, I don't know how that came about. Maybe I just got the idea, oh, that'd be interesting, because I had a bunch of the plastic eyeballs, put them in the glass. And then when I rolled around on the table, like I said before, the eyes look around. I thought that was hilarious because they're tourists, they're looking around. So it's whatever physicality comes out of the objects and the casting. Like I have an exhibit up now at the Museum of the City in New York. And that's the farming in America. So with that, the casting for that was like I needed a barn and a silo. So I used a old school lunchbox, which is shaped just like an old school barn. And for the silo, I used a thermos. So they're both containers for food, which is what barns and silos are also for. So it's that, that kind of thing. You think of what you need, and then you find it. Or the other way around, you have something and you cast it in something. It's like casting a play.
Totally. Here's some more from your piece. Let's see.
Oh yeah, the middle section, I'm using a piece of styrofoam. You can't see the detail inside, but it was something about a loft-like apartment, which even in '81, this was like a thing. They were selling apartments and saying they were loft-like. And they on the upper left, you can see that's the apartment with the more apartments, the apartment building with more more dividers or whatever. And then the church, I don't really remember what that is. Some scam about religion, but I think the frame, we had our picture taken and that was the moment. But the church thing is actually a clock. And it's pink plastic with like saints and stuff on it. And that I did not give the heave ho. I should cast that in a puppet show about Christopher Hitchens or something.
Right on. Cool. Is that all I have? And I think I've just, there's you mentioned
that's Yankee
Reagan.
Yeah, that's Yankee Stadium in the center. I remember that. It's some piece of plastic crap that I found on the street, and then I put American flags along the top of the thing. If you see the middle picture on the top, you can barely make out the flags. And that stinking thing really looked like Yankee Stadium. It had sort of little pockets in it and all of that. I just sort of jiggle around and do the crowd noise. And say it again.
Was that that's the bottom left? Is that the subway?
Yeah, that's the subway going back and forth. That's the plastic tubes. And I still have the plastic tubes. I don't have the dirt anymore. Oh yeah, and Reagan came in a briefcase. You see it on the upper left. I'm holding a cheap plastic black briefcase, and he makes an arrival in the briefcase. Oh, it was a helicopter, right? Because I don't think I have any video of this thing. Maybe it exists, but it's interesting seeing these things because I have no recollection. But when I see them, the photographs, it's like, oh yeah, Yankee Stadium. And I'm wearing all polyester. I had like a pink polyester shirt, and I think like salmon-colored pants, and some heinous bright lime green, horrible 70s tie, and I was extremely flammable.
Love it. Let's see here. Oh, and yeah, this is the drummer review, commemorated this event with a lovely article.
So I had said that this was a test case to see if anyone would pay attention. And back in the early 80s, if you aspired to have importance within the experimental theater world, what a 5-page write-up in the drama review was more important than a New York Times piece. I
Very
was
cool.
thrilled.
Yeah, they sure did a lovely write-up here. Let's see, is that it? Is that all I have? I think that may be all I have. Let's take a look. Yeah. So those are all the images that I've got, but plenty to look back on here. Yeah, Dick.
Paul asked for an epilogue about Lily. So if it's appropriate, I might take a stab at that now.
Absolutely.
So the show obviously got attention, having with the test event gotten good results. The next step was the Mermaid Parade, and with the Mermaid Parade, Coney Island USA took off, got attention, got some grants, and by 1985 went full-time renting a building. Meanwhile, Lily was in her 80s. We did this show in 81, kept on helping her out and visiting in 82. In 83, I was around a lot because I was working on the Mermaid Parade. The Mermaid Parade was so successful in 84, the Chamber of Commerce hired me to be their public relations director. And I was pretty busy. And Lily had her shtick that she had used on me and before me had used on scores of artists over the decades of, oh, poor me, could you help me out? I need this done or that done. Oh, you lovely artist, how wonderful of you. So when I wasn't around, but together with other people like the Hysterical Society, we were getting attention from new audiences for Coney Island. Other artists would wander in, and one of them was a woman, I believe her name was Ellen Fisher, who was successful at doing some documentary films. And she helped Lily, and like a lot of people who help Lily, quickly felt overwhelmed and exasperated. So instead of checking in with Lily every once in a while like I did, instead of just like getting out of there and losing contact, Ellen Fisher decided it would be great to make a film about the last day of the Wax Museum, and she helped facilitate the sale of the Wax Museum and removal by Guernsey's auction house. Guernsey's dismantled the Wax Museum, did not keep the painted backgrounds, did not keep the painted tableaus, did not keep the mannequins or the clothing, stripped everything down to the heads and the hands, threw everything else in the garbage. Some of the signage currently in the Coney Island Museum and the railing in use at Sideshows by the Seashore, I fished out of garbage dumpsters.
Wow.
Later on, after about a 2-year period, Guernsey's had an auction in the tent of the Big Apple Circus set up at Lincoln Center. It was a high-end carousel horse auction. With as a curiosity, the opening act was the heads from the Wax Museum. I did not want to see the Wax Museum disassembled. I did not go to the auction. The heads did not fetch a lot of money. They went for a few $100s each. A number of people, some of who I know, have heads in their private collection. Lily got some money, not much money. So pretty much the year Coney Island, USA went full-time on the boardwalk in 1985, that same year, 1985, was the third annual Mermaid Parade. We honored Lily in the Mermaid Parade 1985. And she had a seat of honor on the reviewing stand. After the end of the 85 season, Lily was not in Coney Island anymore.
Right on. And there's some of these heads in the museum still. I'm not sure which they are, but there's certainly a couple there.
Yeah, a couple got donated, not from famous people. The Joe Coleman, the artist who comes to shows, so it'll probably be a Bambi show Friday night, has Richard Speck and a number of the heads.
Oh, wow.
Paul, you might know a designer who worked many years for La Mama and worked on the Spook House play. What's his name? Now I'm blanking. A designer who did Spook House, who did Lenny, who worked with Tom O'Horgan. He's got Albert Einstein at his house. If I remembered his name, I'd press you more.
Wow, cool.
Right on. Any final thoughts? This has been a really chilling and interesting look back here on a very special event. Paul, anything you want to put a button on this?
Well, I think it's a great tribute to Dick's vision to put on this event and to have it at Lily's place to support her. And so my hat's off to you, Dick, that you had the good taste and the good timing and the fortitude to get together with. And can you imagine these douchebags that didn't show up, man? And they missed out on the history. So
I have to thank you, because I don't always hit a home run first time out. In 1985, I opened Sideshows by the Seashore without a sideshow and booked a season of jazz and world music and performance art. And nobody wanted to buy a ticket at all. And when I was despairing and on the verge of bankruptcy, I bumped into you somewhere and you explained to me what a bally was. And at least learning from you how to bally people in, not even knowing what they were going to see, just because the spiel and the price was right. We got good at getting people to pay to go in and decide that they didn't like it and then walk out.
Right. Well, it was something that we learned at Bread and Puppet because we had like a midway before the circus up in Glover, Vermont. And so we'd have sideshows in the midway with the puppet shows. And you had to bark to get a crowd. So you had to invent a pattern and figure out a way to sucker people into coming and watching your stinking puppet show. So it was drawing on a long tradition of how you would imagine these folks would play and what they would say, and creating patter. And I guess sometimes the patter is even better than the shows. But it's fun. I love barking. Yeah, it's good. It's a good job.
It's what the people want. It's what the audiences want. After the first year of failing with culture, we booked in Down and Dirty Sideshows and did the artist stuff Friday, Saturday nights. And that formula's worked for the next 3.5 decades. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. It was
So-
fantastic.
Well, to bring our time to a close, I'll thanks to the Coney Island Museum, Lisa Mangler Schaefer, for cooperating and providing all of this archival imagery for us. Huge thanks to you, Dick, and to you, Paul, for taking the time to dig up these memories. This is super special. And cheers on 40 years looking back. Here's to many more, and I hope to see you both soon.
And thank you, Brendan. It's inspiring to meet younger people with the same dedication and know-how to do as good a job as you do putting on things like this. And plus all you do for puppetry now in the New York region.
Thanks so much. Yeah, check out Puppets Come Home at Coney Island and all the wonderful puppetry in New York. And please check out Coney Island USA, ConeyIsland.com.
Hey, is Beekman still on the air on any station?
Well, I got a residual check yesterday for $179, which happens once every couple of years. I have a lot of checks.
If we want to watch it, where do we go?
Well, I don't really know. This is a TV show I was on for a bunch of years that we shot in the 90s. It was called Beekman's World. It was a science educational show.
Brilliant science educational show.
Well, thanks, man. Yeah, it's very popular in Brazil and Mexico. So it's possible that's where people are seeing the show. But you can see clips on YouTube.
Cool. And your website is Zaloom.com.
Yes, it's a little rusty, but I'm making little movies about Santa Claus, little idiotic movies. It's on a YouTube channel called Fruit of Zaloom. And if you search that, you can find some of our dumbass Santa Claus movies, political satire. They're not too long, too painful, so check them out.
Oh, they're a treat. I've seen some. Cool. Well, thank you both again. Happy Halloween to our audience. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. And have a lovely evening. Thank you all.
Thank you. Happy
Thank you.
Halloween.
Woohoo!